Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a figure whose name you probably know, but whose story, and maybe more importantly, whose actual name and ideas might be a bit fuzzier than you think.
Absolutely. We're diving into the world of the man who profoundly shaped Chinese society for, well, millennia.
We're talking about Confucius. But let's kick off with that name itself, because it's not quite what it seems, is it?
Not at all. It's a fantastic starting point, actually. The name most people in the West know, Confucius, is actually a Latinized version.
Latinized, so not Chinese.
Right. It comes from Kang Signy, which just means Master Kong. King was his family name.
And physically means master.
Exactly. His actual given name was Kong Q. But the name Confucius, that was coined much later, late 16th century, by Jesuit missionaries. They were the first wave bringing his teachings and writings to Europe. And they essentially repackaged him, gave him this Latin name to make him fit better, perhaps, into the European intellectual landscape of the time.
That's incredible. So the name itself is a product of cultural translation, centuries after he lived.
Precisely. It speaks volumes about his global reach, but also how identities can be shaped by later interpretations.
Okay, so our mission today is clear. We've got the sources here, and we want to get past the Latin name and understand the real Kong Q, or Master Kong. His life, his core ideas, and how this figure, born around 551 BCE, had such a staggering, long-lasting impact. He's seen as the paragon of Chinese sages, right?
The ultimate sage, traditionally. And to really get him, you have to picture the world he was born into, the Spur and Autumn period.
Sounds poetic, but it wasn't, was it?
Far from it. It was a time of, well, intense turmoil. The Zhou dynasty, the central power, had basically collapsed. China was fragmented into these little feudal states that were constantly at war with each other.
Just chaos and conflict. Social breakdown, political instability.
Exactly. Moral standards seemed to be dissolving. But interestingly, this chaos also led to a huge amount of intellectual activity. They call it the 100 schools of thought. Lots of thinkers trying to figure out how to fix things.
But Confucius wasn't just another voice in that crowd proposing something brand new.
No, quite the opposite. He looked at the chaos and thought, we've lost something essential. He believed they'd abandoned the wisdom and the values of the earlier Zhou period, a time he saw as more ordered and harmonious.
So his solution was backward-looking in a way.
In the sense that he wanted to revive past wisdom, yes. He famously said he was a transmitter who invented nothing. His whole project was about recovering and re-energizing these ancient principles to create social harmony and ethical behavior in his own turbulent times.
And that project became Confucianism.
It's Confucianism, which is, it's a whole system. It covers everything from personal ethics, morality, being righteous, kind, sincere, to how government should work.
And a key part of that was how rulers should rule, wasn't it?
Absolutely central. He argued for rule based on virtue, on the ruler being a moral example, not relying on, punishments or rewards or just raw power, which was becoming the norm. It was quite radical for the time.
Okay, let's get into the man himself, Master Kong's life. You might expect someone who founded a philosophy that shaded an empire to come from, the highest levels of society.
Yeah, you might think royalty or something, but no, his beginnings were incredibly humble.
Where was he born?
He was born in a small town called Zhou in the state of Lu. That's modern Quifu in Shandong province. His father, Kong Signy, was a military commandant, but he was quite old when Confucius was born and died when Confucius was only 3.
Just 3. So his mother raised him.
Yes, his mother, Yan Zhangzai, raised him, and apparently they were quite poor, lived in poverty.
That's a crucial detail, isn't it? It kind of counters the idea that wisdom only comes from privilege. How did he get educated then, if they were poor?
Well, he managed to attend schools that were open to commoners, and he clearly threw himself into it. He studied what became known as the 6 arts.
The 6 arts. What did that involve?
It was a pretty comprehensive curriculum, actually. Writes LMU, which is crucial. We'll come back to that. Music, archery, charioteering, calligraphy, and mathematics.
So not just philosophy. Practical skills, too.
Very practical. This was the kind of education you'd need to be an effective official or administrator. It shows his focus wasn't purely abstract from the start.
And what about his social class? Where did he fit in?
He belonged to a class called the Shi. That's S-H-I, Shi.
What does that mean?
It's often translated as gentry or knights, but maybe scholar officials gets closer to it later on. They were sort of a layer between the hereditary aristocracy and the common farmers. Educated men, often without much land, who served in minor government posts or as clerks or military officers.
So their position depended more on their skills and knowledge than their birth.
Exactly. And Confucius really championed this class. He elevated the ideal of the educated, virtuous she as the person best suited for public service. That itself was a challenge to the old system of pure hereditary power.
Before he became this great teacher, what did he actually do?
His early jobs were very down to earth. In his early 20s, he worked as a bookkeeper, basically an accountant, and also as a caretaker of livestock, sheep, and horses.
Humble beginnings indeed.
But even then, he was apparently known for his dedication to tradition. When his mother died, he was around 23, and he reportedly mourned her for the full traditional 3 years.
3 years. That sounds intense.
It was a major ritual requirement, Elaine demonstrating filial piety. And it was something that many of the elites in his time were starting to neglect, so him doing it was a statement. It showed his commitment to these core values, even before he started teaching them widely. It was personal, but also deeply political.
Right, that sets the stage for his move into actual politics in his home state of Luke around 501 BCE. He rose pretty quickly, didn't he?
Yeah, he held a few posts, governor of a town, and then eventually became minister of crime, which sounds dramatic, but it was a significant position.
He had a very specific, very ambitious goal.
Hugely ambitious. His aim was nothing less than to restore the power of the Duke of Lu. The Duke was supposed to be the legitimate ruler, but in reality, he was weak. The real power lay with 3 incredibly powerful aristocratic families, the Ji, the Meng, and the Shu clans.
So Confucius wanted to break their power. How?
His strategy was clever and symbolic. He proposed dismantling the fortified city walls that belonged to these 3 families. These weren't just walls, they were symbols and sources of their independent military power. Tearing them down would have physically weakened them and centralized authority back under the Duke.
Sounds like a recipe for conflict. Did he just order them torn down?
It wasn't quite that simple. He had to rely heavily on diplomacy, political pressure, and even leveraging moments of chaos. It was complex maneuvering.
Like using rebellions against them.
Exactly. For instance, there was a retainer of the Shu family who rebelled. Confucius used the Duke's authority to pressure the Shu family into helping put down their own retainer's rebellion. This forced them to publicly acknowledge the Duke's supremacy and weakened their position when it came to keeping their walls.
And wasn't there another incident involving one of his own disciples?
Yes, with Gongzhan Farao, a retainer of the powerful Ji family, Gongzhan seized control of a city called Bi. Now, Confucius generally didn't like rebellion, but he saw an opportunity here. His disciple, Zhang Yu, played a crucial role in keeping the Duke and the other families united against this rogue retainer.
So Confucius used the rebellion to force the Ji family's hand.
Right. By leading the charge against the rebels in Bi, he basically forced the Ji family to accept the dismantling of Bi's walls afterward, arguing it was necessary to prevent future rebellions. It was really shrewd. After about 1.5 years of this kind of intense pressure, the Shu and Ji families actually agreed to tear down the walls of their main cities, Hao and Bi. It looked like a huge win for Confucius.
He was on the cusp of achieving his vision. Centralized power, ruled by a legitimate duke, advised by virtuous ministers like himself.
It seemed that way. But then came the Meng family's city, Cheng. The Meng family head refused. The governor of Cheng argued, perhaps reasonably, that tearing down their walls would leave the state vulnerable to attack from the neighboring state of Qi. The Duke tried to besiege Cheng, but failed. And just like that, the whole project stalled.
Wow. So one practical, maybe even legitimate security concern stopped his entire idealistic reform.
It seems so. It really highlights the clash between his moral political ideals and the hard realities of power and military strategy. He couldn't persuade or force the Meng family on this final step.
And that failure must have had consequences for him personally.
Big time. He'd made powerful enemies, especially within the Ji family. His position became untenable, so around 497 BCE, he had to leave Lu. But the way he left is also very telling.
How so? What triggered his departure?
Well, the neighboring state of Qi, which was worried about Lu getting stronger under Confucius, decided to sabotage things. They sent a gift to the Duke of Lu.
Not weapons, I assume.
No, 100 fine horses and, crucially, 80 beautiful dancing girls.
Classic distraction.
And it worked. The Duke was apparently captivated, spent days enjoying the entertainment, and completely neglected his official duties, even important state rituals. Confucius was deeply disappointed.
Now, most people in that situation might resign and protest, maybe denounce the Duke publicly.
But that wouldn't have been proper, according to Ellen and the Rules of Propriety. It would have shamed his ruler, which was a serious breach. So Confucius waited.
Waited for what?
He waited for a smaller, more technical breach of etiquette by the Duke. The opportunity came when the Duke failed to send Confucius his proper share of meat from a state sacrifice, a relatively minor oversight in the grand scheme of things.
But significant according to ritual.
Exactly. Confucius used that minor mistake as the official reason, the pretext for his departure. It allowed him to leave on principle, without directly criticizing the Duke's major moral failings with the horses and dancers. It was a very careful, face-saving, but principled exit.
And that departure marks the beginning of his famous exile.
Yeah. Yes, the period of exile. It lasted for over a decade, maybe 13 or 14 years. He essentially became a wandering scholar advisor.
Where did he go?
He traveled all over northeast and central China, visiting the courts of various states: Wei, Song, Zhang, Cao, Chu, Qi, Chen, Kai. The list goes on.
Doing what? Pitching his ideas.
Pretty much. He was expounding his political philosophy, offering his services to rulers, hoping someone would actually implement his vision for a virtuous, well-ordered state.
Did anyone take him up on it?
Not really. Rulers seemed to respect him. They listened to his advice sometimes, but nobody was willing to undertake the kind of fundamental moral and political reform he was advocating. It was probably too radical, too challenging to their own power structures.
So a decade of wandering and essentially political rejection. How did he eventually get back home?
He was finally invited back to Lu when he was 68 years old. The invitation came from Ji Kengzi, who was the chief minister at the time, ironically, from the same Ji family he had clashed with earlier.
Why did they invite him back?
Perhaps they felt Lu needed his wisdom, or maybe his reputation had grown so much during his exile that it was prestigious to have him back. Whatever the reason, he returned.
Did he go back into politics?
No. He spent his final years until he died around 479 BCE, primarily focused on teaching and editing texts. This is where his focus really shifted, and arguably where his lasting legacy was truly cemented.
Teaching. He had disciples follow him during his exile, right?
Yes, a loyal group. But back in Lu, he dedicated himself fully to it. Tradition says he taught around 3,000 students in total over his life.
3,000. That's huge.
It is. And among them, there was an inner circle, maybe 72 or 77, who were considered his most accomplished disciples, true masters of the 6 arts themselves.
So you mentioned editing texts.
This was crucial. He saw his role now as preserving and transmitting the wisdom of the past. He's traditionally credited with editing or even writing parts of what became known as the 5 classics.
The foundational texts of Chinese culture.
Exactly. Things like the Book of Documents, the Book of Odes, the Spring and Autumn Annals. By compiling and editing these, he ensured that the historical records, the poetry, the rituals, the philosophy of the idealized early Zhou period survived the ongoing chaos and became the basis for education for centuries to come. His political career might have failed, but his work as a teacher and preserver of culture was a monumental success.
Okay, let's transition to the philosophy itself, the core ideas of Confucianism. If his goal was to fix society, how did he propose doing that on an individual level? It starts with becoming a certain kind of person, right?
Yes, the ideal is the Junzi, often translated as gentleman or superior man, but maybe exemplary person captures it better. The entire system is geared towards cultivating Junzi.
And how does one become a Junzi?
Through study. But Confucius meant something very specific by study. Remember his transmitter, not inventor line? He put immense emphasis on deeply engaging with the ancient classics.
So reading old books.
Reading, internalizing, reflecting on them. The Annals, the Book of Odes, the Book of Changes. The goal wasn't just to accumulate knowledge like trivia. It was about moral self-cultivation. Absorbing the wisdom in these texts was meant to shape your character, your judgment, and ultimately guide your actions towards promoting harmony and order.
So it's less about knowing facts and more about becoming virtuous.
Precisely. It's fundamentally a type of virtue ethics. It's not based on a strict set of divine laws or rules. It's about developing virtues within yourself, cultivating good character, and learning to make good ethical judgments by emulating moral exemplars, the sages of the past, or even Confucius himself.
How did he teach this? Was it through lectures?
The Analects, which is the main source we have for his teachings compiled by his disciples after his death, shows it was often through conversation, short sayings, anecdotes, responding to specific situations. It's very contextual.
And there's that one famous anecdote from the Analects that really seems to capture his focus on people, his humanism.
The story about the stables burning down. It's incredibly powerful.
Tell us about it.
The story goes that Confucius returned from court one day to find that his stables had caught fire and burned down. His immediate and apparently only question was anyone hurt?
He didn't ask about the horses.
Exactly. He did not ask about the horses. Now, you have to understand, horses were incredibly valuable for transport, for warfare, for status, even for rituals. Losing them would have been a huge material and symbolic loss.
But he prioritized the people.
Instantly and exclusively. His first thought was for the well-being of the stable hands or anyone else who might have been there. It's often cited as just this stark example of his profound humanism placing human welfare above property, above animals, above everything else.
That really sets the tone, and it connects directly to his most famous ethical principle, doesn't it? The sort of golden rule equivalent.
Yes, though it's often called the silver rule because it's stated negatively. It comes from a conversation where a disciple, Zigong, asked if there was one single word one could live by.
And Confucius said,
He suggested shu, which is often translated as reciprocity or consideration, and he explained it. Do not impose on others what you would not choose for yourself.
Don't do unto others
What you wouldn't want them to do to you. Exactly. It's about empathy, putting yourself in someone else's shoes, and using that understanding to guide your own actions, primarily by refraining from harmful behavior. It's the practical bedrock of his ethics.
Okay, so empathy and humanism are central. But his system is also known for these key interconnected concepts. Let's start with Elgay. We mentioned it earlier with the 6 arts. It's usually translated as rights or propriety.
Right, but it's much broader than just formal ceremonies, although it definitely includes those, like state rituals and ancestor veneration. Confucius took this existing concept and really expanded it.
How so?
For him, El encompassed the whole spectrum of social and political institutions, proper conduct in government, but also, crucially, the etiquette of everyday life. How you interact with your parents, your ruler, your friends, even strangers. It's the entire code of conduct.
So it's about knowing the right way to act in every situation.
Yes. Confucius believed these forms of behavior, these Eldae, weren't arbitrary. They were developed over time by wise sage leaders to structure society and express respect within relationships. Training in Elglain, learning and practicing these forms, wasn't just about appearing polite. It was essential for cultivating ethical judgment. It teaches you social discipline, respect, and how to navigate complex social interactions appropriately. It's the external framework for a harmonious society.
Okay, so LAN's the outer form, the proper way to act, what provides the inner substance. That brings us to Yi, right? Righteousness.
Exactly. If Elling is the how, then Yi is the what and why. Yi means righteousness, justice, or appropriateness. It's about understanding what is the morally right thing to do in a particular situation and then doing it.
And he contrasted this directly with something else, didn't he?
Yes, very explicitly. He contrasted Yi with Li, which means profit, gain, or personal advantage. A junzi, the exemplary person, acts based on Yi because it's the right thing to do. A lesser person acts based on Li, seeking personal benefit.
So doing the right thing for its own sake, regardless of the outcome or reward?
Precisely. That's the essence of Yi. It provides the moral compass. Performing a ritual perfectly, but doing it only for show or personal gain, Li would be a failure of Yi. The action lacks moral substance.
So we have Elming, the proper form, and Yi, the right moral intention. What's the capstone? The ultimate goal. That must be Ren.
Ren is the absolute core. It's often translated as benevolence, humaneness, goodness, or human-heartedness. It's the highest virtue encompassing all others.
What does this mean in practice?
It's the virtue of perfectly fulfilling your responsibilities towards others. It stems from that deep empathy and understanding we talked about. Shu is related. It's about genuinely caring for others and acting accordingly. Confucius broke it down into 5 components: seriousness, generosity, sincerity, diligence, and kindness.
So Ren is the ultimate goal of self-cultivation.
Yes. To achieve Ren is to become a fully realized human being, someone whose responses and actions naturally and perfectly align with virtue in all situations. It's not just a feeling, it's enacted virtue.
And this ties into the idea of finding the mean, the balance.
Very much so. Confucius emphasized that virtue often lies in a mean between 2 extremes. For example, true generosity, Ren includes generosity, isn't about giving away everything recklessly, nor is it about being stingy. It's about giving the right amount in the right way at the right time. Finding that appropriate balance in every virtue, in every situation, is part of the challenge and skill of becoming a junzi. It requires judgment, cultivated through LA and motivated by you.
This intense focus on personal virtue and moral cultivation obviously shaped his political philosophy too. He was fundamentally against the ideas that were starting to gain traction. what became known as legalism.
Oh, completely opposed. Legalism was emerging during this chaotic period, arguing that people are fundamentally selfish and lazy, and the only way to govern them is through strict laws, clear rewards for obedience, and harsh punishments for disobedience. Control through coercion.
And Confucius argued,
He argued the exact opposite. The best government leads by moral example, and through the established norms of propriety, not by force or fear. There's a very famous passage in the Analects that draws this contrast perfectly.
the one about shame.
That's the one. He says something like, if you lead the people with laws and regulate them by punishments, they will try to avoid the punishment but have no sense of shame. If you lead them by virtue and regulate them by the rules of propriety, they will have the sense of shame, and moreover, they will become good.
So legalism gets you compliance, maybe, but Confucianism aims to cultivate actual inner goodness and self-discipline.
Exactly. The ruler's primary job isn't to enforce rules, but to be a living embodiment of virtue. If the ruler is virtuous, that moral influence will spread throughout society naturally, inspiring people to be good.
This connects to the mandate of heaven idea, right? Tiaming.
Yes. His ideal was a restoration of the early Zhu system, where the ruler governed all under heaven, Tianxia, because heaven recognized their moral merit. The right to rule wasn't just inherited, it had to be continually earned through virtuous conduct. If a ruler became corrupt or ineffective, they could lose the mandate, justifying a change in leadership. The ruler had to be a role model.
It sounds very top-down, though. Ruler sets the example, everyone follows. What about accountability? If the ruler wasn't virtuous, could anyone challenge them?
That's a really important point. While the system is hierarchical based on the 5 key relationships like ruler-subject, father-son, husband-wife, it's not about blind obedience.
Oh, so?
Loyalty wasn't just to the person of the ruler, but to the principles of good governance, to you. A subordinate, particularly a minister, had a moral duty to advise the ruler, to point out their mistakes, even to remonstrate quite strongly if the ruler was going against moral principles or harming the state.
So you could speak truth to power.
You were obligated to, out of a deeper loyalty to righteousness and the well-being of the people. Now, how you did that was crucial. It had to be done with propriety. But the duty to counsel and correct was built into the system. It adds a layer of accountability.
That makes it much more complex than just obey the king.
Absolutely. It demands constant moral engagement from everyone involved.
One last thing before we move to his legacy. We mentioned the 6 arts earlier, and music and poetry were part of that. Why were the arts, especially music, so important to his ethical and political system?
He saw music and rites as deeply complementary. Rites provide the external structure for behavior, ensuring order and propriety. Music works on the inner person, cultivating feelings, harmony, and emotional balance.
He actually said something about that, didn't he?
Yes, something along the lines of, music brings about harmony, rites ensure obedience. He believed that the right kind of music, refined, harmonious music, not decadent or licentious music, could actually help to cultivate a person's character and bring their emotions into alignment with the proper order of things, with heaven and earth.
So listening to the right music could make you a better person.
In his view, yes. It refined the spirit. And poetry, particularly the classic of poetry, the Shijing, was also vital. He encouraged his disciples to study the odes intensely.
Why poetry?
He believed the poems taught crucial skills. How to contemplate things deeply, how to interact socially with nuance, how to express feelings appropriately, even how to manage negative emotions like resentment in a constructive way. Understanding poetry meant understanding subtlety, metaphor, and human emotion, all essential qualities for a junzi, especially one in public service. It was part of the holistic education needed to govern well.
Okay, so we have this incredibly rich philosophy, developed by a man who faced considerable hardship and political disappointment. Let's trace the legacy, this unbroken thread. His immediate impact was as a teacher, wasn't it? He's considered a pioneer in education.
Absolutely. He's really regarded as China's first great private educator. Before him, formal education was largely the preserve of the aristocracy. Confucius opened the doors, teaching students from various social classes, focusing on cultivating character and preparing them for public service, regardless of their birth.
And his school, his disciples, they became influential.
Hugely influential. Even though his political ideas weren't adopted in his lifetime, his students spread his teachings, and Confucianism became a major intellectual force during the chaotic Warring States period that followed his death.
But the tradition wasn't monolithic, was it? There were different interpretations right from the start.
Definitely. Two of his most important followers really shaped the future debate within Confucianism, Mencius and Xunzi.
Mencius came first.
Yes, Mencius, Mengznen, lived in the 4th century BCE. His defining contribution was the idea that human nature is innately good. He believed that ethical intuitions like compassion are natural to us, and the goal of cultivation is to nurture that goodness.
That sounds quite optimistic.
It is. Mencius represents the idealist extreme within Confucianism, emphasizing the inherent potential for Ren within everyone.
And then came Xunzi.
Xunzi, about a century later in the 3rd century BCE, offered a stark contrast. He took a much more realistic, perhaps even materialistic view.
How so?
Xunzi argued that human nature is not inherently good. He believed people are naturally inclined towards selfishness and disorder, like a warped piece of wood. Morality, therefore, isn't innate. It has to be taught and enforced through rigorous education, strict adherence to ritual, LAing, and social conditioning.
So nurture over nature, essentially.
You could put it that way. For Xunzi, goodness is achieved through intense effort and external discipline, not just by cultivating something already inside you. This tension between Mencius's idealism and Xunzi's realism gave Confucianism incredible philosophical depth and adaptability for centuries.
But this whole intellectual tradition faced a major threat when China was finally unified, right?
Really?
Under the Qin dynasty.
A massive threat. The Qin dynasty, which conquered all the other states in 221 BCE, adopted legalism as its official ideology.
The very philosophy Confucius argued against.
Exactly. The Qin emperor, Qin Shi Huang, and his prime minister, Li Si, saw Confucianism, with its emphasis on morality, tradition, and advising the ruler, as subversive and impractical for running a centralized authoritarian state.
And this led to the infamous burning of the books and burying of the scholars.
Yes, it was a direct attack on Confucianism and other non-legalist schools. Texts were destroyed, and scholars who resisted were persecuted, even executed. It was a dark time for Confucian thought, seen as the absolute antithesis of Qin's reliance on harsh laws and punishments.
But the Qin dynasty didn't last very long. What happened under the next dynasty, the Han?
The Han dynasty, which took over after the Qin collapse, initially continued some legalist practices for state administration, but they needed a more unifying, socially cohesive ideology. And under Emperor Wu of Han, around 140 BCE, a pivotal decision was made.
What was that?
Emperor Wu officially sanctioned Confucianism as the state philosophy. Confucius's works, particularly the 5 classics he edited, became the official curriculum for the entire imperial bureaucracy.
So Confucianism went from being persecuted to being the state ideology. How did that work, blending it with the practical needs of running an empire?
It was a brilliant synthesis, really. Confucianism provided the ethical framework, the justification for the hierarchical social order, the 5 relationships, the emphasis on filial piety, which supported loyalty to the emperor, and importantly, the ideal of rule by virtuous, educated officials.
And this is where the civil service exams came in.
Precisely. To become a government official in Han China, and for most of the next 2,000 years, you had to pass rigorous exams based on your knowledge of the Confucian classics. This institutionalized Confucianism at the heart of the state apparatus. It created a meritocratic path to power based on education, not just birth, fulfilling one of Confucius's underlying aims.
A system based on Confucian texts lasting until when?
Almost without break until 1912. With the fall of the last imperial dynasty. It's an astonishing run. Think about that 2 millennia of governance shaped by the ideas of this one philosopher.
And the philosophy itself continued to evolve during that time, didn't it? You mentioned Neo-Confucianism.
Yes, particularly during the later Tang and Song dynasties, roughly 7th to 13th centuries CE. Confucianism faced new intellectual challenges, especially from the growing influence of Buddhism and Taoism, which offered sophisticated metaphysics and spiritual practices that classical Confucianism didn't emphasize as much.
So Confucian scholars had to respond.
They did. Neo-Confucianism was a major revitalization movement. Thinkers like Zhu Xi and others integrated metaphysical concepts about the nature of reality, Li and Hepi, and developed new methods for self-cultivation to deepen the spiritual dimension of Confucianism.
Like meditation.
Exactly. Techniques like quiet sitting, Jingzhu, which bears resemblance to Buddhist meditation, became part of Neo-Confucian practice, aimed at achieving inner clarity and understanding one's own nature. It showed how Confucianism could absorb and adapt ideas from competing traditions to remain relevant.
Okay, so it dominated Chinese thought for centuries. When did it start influencing the West? You mentioned the Jesuits earlier.
That's where it begins in Europe. Starting in the late 16th century, Jesuit missionaries like Michel Ruggieri and especially Matteo Ricci began translating Confucian texts into Latin.
And these translations reached European thinkers.
Yes, although the impact really snowballed with later publications, especially a major one in Paris in 1687. This introduced Confucius's ideas to the leading lights of the European Enlightenment.
Who was reading him?
Figures like Leibniz, Voltaire, later Benjamin Franklin, even Thomas Jefferson, they were fascinated.
What did they find so appealing? It seems like a very different world.
For thinkers of the Enlightenment, particularly the deists who believed in a creator god but rejected organized religion and revealed scripture, Confucius offered something amazing, a highly sophisticated, rational system of ethics and governance that was based entirely on reason, observation of human relationships, and self-cultivation without recourse to divine revelation.
So he was like a model of a secular sage.
Exactly. He represented the possibility of achieving profound morality and social order through human reason alone. His ideas about virtue-based rule also provided ammunition for critiques of the arbitrary power of European absolute monarchs. He became an intellectual hero for many Enlightenment figures.
It's incredible to think his ideas influenced the founding ideals of places like the United States. You even see him depicted in the U.S. Supreme Court, right?
Yes. On the South Wall frieze, he's included among the great lawgivers and teachers of history, specifically honored as a teacher of harmony and virtue.
But his legacy in the 20th century in China itself was much more troubled.
Very much so. After the fall of the empire, and especially during the rise of communism and the Cultural Revolution under Mao Zedong, Confucius and Confucianism came under fierce attack.
Why? What was the criticism?
He was condemned as a symbol of feudalism, hierarchy, and oppression. His teachings were labeled a reactionary ideology that supported the old imperial system and hindered progress. The emphasis on hierarchy, obedience, and tradition was seen as completely counter to the revolutionary spirit.
And this wasn't just theoretical criticism, was it?
No, it was violent. Red Guards famously attacked and desecrated his tomb and temple complex in his hometown of Corfu during the Cultural Revolution. Veneration of Confucius was banned. It was a concerted effort to eradicate his influence.
But it didn't stick, did it?
It couldn't really. His ideas are just too deeply woven into the fabric of Chinese culture. Starting in the 1980s, after Mao's death, there was a gradual rehabilitation. His veneration resumed, his importance was re-acknowledged, albeit sometimes reinterpreted to fit modern contexts.
And today, he's recognized globally again.
Absolutely. His birthplace, Corfu, is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and hosts major international conferences and celebrations. And as a quirky sign of his reach, there's even an asteroid, number 78503, named Confucius.
That's quite the tribute. Now, there's one final, incredibly tangible aspect of his legacy we need to touch on: his actual family.
Ah, yes, the Kong family descendants. It's truly remarkable.
They have the longest family tree in the world, don't they?
Well, longest recorded, verifiable pedigree, yes. They trace their lineage directly back to Confucius.
How many generations?
They are now into the 83rd generation. It's staggering. An estimate suggests there might be as many as 3 million descendants alive today, spread across the globe.
And this lineage wasn't just a private family matter. It was officially recognized for centuries.
For millennia, imperial governments, dynasty after dynasty, bestowed honors and titles on the mainline descendant. The most prominent title was Duke Yansheng, meaning Duke extending sagehood. This hereditary title was held almost continuously from the Song dynasty right up until 1935, when the Republic of China abolished it.
That level of sustained official honor for a philosopher's family must be unique in world history.
It truly underscores the unparalleled status Confucius held. Even when the family line split during times of upheaval, like during the Song dynasty when one branch fled south to Kwaizu to escape invaders while the main branch stayed north in Corfu, both lines were meticulously tracked and honored. The continuity of the bloodline itself became a symbol of cultural endurance.
And they still maintain the genealogy today.
Oh, yes. A massive effort went into compiling the 5th edition of the Kong family genealogy, which was completed in 2009. It was updated to include ethnic minorities, overseas descendants, and, for the first time, women.
And science has even weighed in.
There have been genetic studies. A 2013 DNA study looked at the Y chromosomes of several different Kong family branches claiming descent and found they shared the same characteristic Y chromosome, providing strong scientific evidence supporting the traditional claim of a single, continuous male lineage stretching back through the centuries.
Wow. So the family itself is a living testament to the enduring legacy of Master Kong. What an incredible journey through the life, thought, and legacy of Confucius, or Master Kong. from those humble beginnings through political struggles and exile to become the architect of a philosophical system that shaped a civilization.
It really is an amazing story. He saw chaos and believed the answer lay in looking back, in reviving ancient virtues, but he did it in a way that created something incredibly resilient and adaptable for the future. His focus was always on that inner cultivation leading to outer harmony.
That idea of self-cultivation, of striving for Ren, Yi, and La is powerful, and his emphasis on finding the right way, the mean between extremes.
That concept of the mean is so central. Virtue isn't just about having good intentions. It's about finding the skillful, appropriate expression of that virtue in every context. Giving the right amount, showing the right degree of respect, being firm when necessary, but not harsh. It's a constant balancing act.
And that leads us perfectly into a final thought for you, our listener, to consider drawing on everything we've explored from these sources. Confucius lived in a time of intense division and competing ideologies, and his solution hinged on cultivating virtue and finding that mean, that appropriate balance to restore harmony.
So the question to ponder is this. In our modern world, which is arguably just as complex, polarized, and maybe even chaotic in its own ways, with information overload and often very extreme viewpoints dominating public discourse, what specific challenges would someone like Confucius face today in trying to identify and promote that right amount of virtue needed for social and political harmony? Where would he even begin to find the mean amidst today's extremes?